Welcome.
The Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community is a regulatory science initiative that aims to facilitate innovations in pathology, as well as advance safety and effectiveness evaluation. The PI Collaborative Community aims to harmonize approaches to speed delivery to patients through collaboration in the pre-competitive space. The PI-CC is open to all stakeholders, public or private, including but not limited to academia, industry, healthcare providers, patients, and advocacy groups. Meetings of this kind are an example of lawful activity under federal antitrust law, because the focus of the meeting is on government action or policy, including the industry's responses or positions taken with respect thereto. However, antitrust monitoring is needed for companies' own protection, since they are direct competitors meeting together. These meetings need to stay within protected subject matters and need to be monitored so that they do not stray off into inappropriate areas, such as pricing and price terms, sales and service territories for particular products, customers and customer territories, each company's individual decisions regarding selection of suppliers or customers, marketing plans and especially future marketing plans or new product offerings, other proprietary or competitively sensitive information. Today's meeting will follow the written agenda, and there will be no discussion of pricing or other prohibited topics. If the discussion veers into those topics, we will terminate the discussion. If you have any questions or concerns about the propriety of a discussion, please raise it immediately, and we will take a break to determine how best to proceed. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium acts as the formal convener, and we will follow their conflict of interest policy. For additional information, we defer to our Code of Conduct and our website, www.pathologyinnovationcc.org. We look forward to moving the field forward.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. Let me see if I can share my screen. Does that work? Maybe we can crop it later, because so I can see at least my slides. All right, welcome. It's June 29th, 3 o'clock. Last Wednesday, we have our monthly steering committee with the Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community, and all rules apply, antitrust monitoring, etc. It's great to see everyone. Try to leave about 15 minutes in the end for questions and follow-up, but it's a very packed agenda. Before getting started, thank you to everyone who has submitted materials. It's great quality and a lot of updates, and I'm also happy to see Esther, who will talk a little bit about CPT codes. So, as you know, regulatory science evolves around many of the regulations that come out from the FDA. And there are currently 3 important regulations that are briefly depicted here. Beautiful symbols from Ulla. And wanted to briefly go over this. And they have their own individual right and project around them. So the first one is a draft guidance that was released in May, I think the 5th or 15th of May, about the use of circulating tumor DNA for early stage solid tumor drug development and or testing. We provided a brief summary in a project page on our website.
Items that we have to take action on. And people.
Okay, so you're welcome to join. We will have 2 meetings coming up. One is actually organized by Friends of Cancer Research. They have a CT monitor project, another collaborative project about expediting drug development using ctDNA. And that provides, I think, a great overview of their project and their efforts. And our project is called Out of the Dark, where we want to review the draft guidance. The official deadline for commenting is July 2nd, which may not be quite sufficient, but as previously illustrated, the FDA usually is not quite as stringent with comments as long as they're informative and well resourced. So this is sort of the first quick overview of this particular draft guidance, and we haven't quite figured out, I think this is the draft date. We invited a lot of people in the ctDNA space, so if you have an essay or if you're interested in this topic, please join. And one of the comments on this element or on this meeting is to consider potentially making comments on the draft guidance. The second draft guidance that was released in April, commenting period is open through July 7th, is a cybersecurity draft guidance that is briefly outlined here in an illustration. What happened, there's actually several healthcare bills associated with this FDA document about how to regulate this. As everyone knows, privacy, cybersecurity is a big issue. And as a brief outline, this is a much longer draft guidance than normal. There's about 49 pages of highly dense contextual material. And you see in these 7 bullet points, there are things like threat modeling, third-party software components and how to integrate those, including labeling and audit trails, security risk management, and then also things like cybersecurity testing, which is relatively new. I know MDIC and many of you have worked on this topic. But then also things like transparency and also a vulnerability management plan. So kind of like if things go wrong, what to do. And this draft guidance, again, I think Ulla will paste the link and or the draft guidance itself. There's also a federal register notice, of course, since it's tied to 1/2 different proposed bills that were introduced in short succession after one another. So this is definitely a field that's moving very rapidly. And if you feel that you and your company want to comment through the Federal Register notice on the bills and or through the FDA document or the draft guidance, this should provide at least a decent outline of what's going on. Of course, you need to read the guidance for yourself. The third guidance, in this case, a final guidance. So this was drafted in 2019, and the topic is effectively the technical performance assessment of quantitative imaging in radiological device pre-market submissions. So that's a mouthful, but why are we presenting this to a digital pathology group? Well, first of all, this is finalized, and it took over 3 years, plus a pandemic, of course. But again, the links will hopefully be in the chat. I think Ulla is pasting those. But this is probably forming a good, reasonable framework to begin with when it comes to, if you imagine, it says here digital pathology devices. That's, of course, by no means identical, but some of the technical performance assessment tools and or frameworks are probably following the same paradigms. So we thought that that is great. If there's interest, please text or email Ulla. We can organize a meeting to go over this. It's, again, this is a final element, so your radiology colleagues, so if you're building AI tools that integrate radiology and pathology, this is definitely a document that should be on your radar. So again, I jump quickly back. So there's a draft guidance on circulating tumor DNA, a draft guidance and 2 proposed bills on cybersecurity, and a final guidance on quantitative imaging, and in particular, the test performance assessment. And I think that illustrates that, of course, the agency is active, but also there's a lot of legislative changes coming. So just raising awareness. I don't know if anyone has comments on this or any specific ideas, or feel free to add that or point out that in the chat. 2 or 3 people have submitted something that's apparently a year old, but we only found out about this probably last 2 weeks. There's a first law on artificial intelligence in the European Commission. It's proposed, is of course not finalized. I think it was from April 2021. It's a gigantic document that regulates a ton of aspects of AI. I would call it similarly complex than the ISO standard around AI. but it's certainly something worth noting. I'm not sure if there's a lot of scientific backing to each and every individual rule that's proposed here. It seems very, very stringent and very closely aligned with GDPR, but I'm not sure whether there's enough scientific evidence to really sort of challenge this, and or, you know, if someone else here, I know we have a couple of representatives from the EU here, if anyone knows anything about this particular act or can provide context, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, it's Esther here. So I did hear a little bit about it. Also, we had a conference in Europe last week, the ECDP conference, or it's already 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, I might be mistaken there, mixing up time zones. But anyway, it was discussed briefly, and there are a lot of elements in there that are well aligned with the thinking what FDA is doing, but there are also a lot of elements in there which makes it very complicated. So you have a medical device regulation, you have an in vitro diagnostic regulation, then you have this regulation, well, this act. There are a lot of unclarities in there and a lot of duplications, and you need to also submit then again to another competent authority, or at least a commission. So it's adding an enormous burden. Therefore, yeah, I'm not involved in further discussing this document, but I know a few people in Europe are, and they're trying to get it accomplished that it will be either embedded in MDR and IVDR instead of like making it again another act. But yeah, I don't know what the status is. That's what I know, what I've heard. Let's put it that way.
You know, I think the alignment between, you know, EMA, FDA, and other regulators is of course of great concern. I know currently data exchange for many companies is almost an insurmountable hurdle if you want to co-create data on, let's say, both sides of the Atlantic and want to use the same data for regulatory submissions. The transparency rules are different, and if I understood at least a few sections that I read on this, there's a lot of, as you call it, burden or, you know, complicated rules that will require a lot of additional effort. But, well, we thought we'd throw it out there in case someone feels competent enough and interested enough to take this on as a separate project or go through this in a little more detail. We can definitely host that as a project or in one of the working groups. All right, let's move on. Just on the sideline, something happened that I believe is very helpful for the field. It is a withdrawn rule that came, I'm not 100% sure whether that was just in the time that the administration switched, but it went into effect on March 22nd, 2021, so it seemed to be like a last-minute rule. But in any case, this sunset final rule and the withdrawal thereof is actually really good because there's several aspects that would require that the FDA would continuously review all kinds of sections again and again and again. I think there was, you know, whatever the motivation was for this, that was withdrawn, and that is probably making the FDA more efficient. I don't know if someone from the FDA is on. I think Brandon couldn't make it today, but if someone else wants to comment, please feel free to do so. But one thing that is accounted for in this is something that I believe is very relevant for our payer strategies group, etc. And, you know, of course, with the Valid Act pending and everyone worrying about, you know, what the cost is of regulatory submissions, there is a website and a dedicated resource already multiple years old. It's called Economic Impact Analysis of FDA Regulations, and that's a phenomenal resource. I hadn't seen it before, but that was tied to this withdrawal. I think, Ulla, if you have the link and paste it, that would be great. So please take a look. Not sure if many of the specific tools and or approvals that you're interested in are already included in this EIA database, but it's definitely something worth noting. And I haven't done a full deep dive by every product code, but yeah, again, if someone, I don't know, I see Victor is on. Not sure if you.
It's
if
just
you
me today, Joe.
Got it.
I haven't. I don't really know much about it, and I haven't heard anything about it until today.
Yeah, I think with our payers group, we should definitely take a deeper look and a deeper dive into it. But I just wanted to share it. I know many of you, with your various interests, have an interest, of course, in economics and return on investment, and also just in general, like what is the effort? And I think that's a great resource. So, Victor, maybe we can also take it offline and discuss if that hasn't been done for some of the digital path related efforts. I think this would be a great group to discuss this with, and maybe we can draw from our membership some of our experts to possibly help and or at least provide input for selection by the agency. Only providing information, not writing it, but just if there's interest, I think we can definitely help.
Happy to learn more. Again, I don't really know much about it, but happy to learn more.
No, awesome. Thank you, Victor. Thanks for joining, by the way.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We have mentioned this in last month's steering committee. The AMA has announced CPT codes specific for digital pathology. And Esther, can I hand this over to you for briefly outlining it? I think we have 2 or 3 slides from you and the DPA in here as well.
Yeah, thanks. And you and I have been discussing this also quite a bit. So if you can go to the next slide. So actually, and what was just previously shown in the previous slide is blown up here in this slide. And actually, what you see is that this is the description, that it's an accepted edition of add-on codes, etc. You can read it for yourself. But I highlighted a few words there, which I believe are important for us to realize what does this really mean. Well, at this moment, this is for additional clinical staff, for the service requirements with digitization of glass. So it's all related still to digital pathology, but not yet really to algorithms or whatsoever, right? It's really about digitizing glass microscope slides. We can dive into more details into that, I think, and we should do that with the payers work group. So this is also a call to action to people who want to join that. I would like to. This is a great opportunity because we got a kind of, like, being transparent here. We got kind of a bit stuck, like how to move forward. And I think this is a great opportunity to dive into it, because now we have quite a few tangible examples that we can work with, because these codes are now category 3. So if you go to the next slide, what does that all mean? So with the DPA, we also looked into it, and we see it is of added value, because it will now allow labs, right, to record activity and begin tracking the value of DP, of digital pathology. That is great, and that's something that we should be doing. The categorization 3 means that there's no CPT, well, there's no reimbursement defined yet, right? So there could be crosswalk, there could be later on, there could be a professional component, and a technical component. And that's something that we have to take into account, because we believe, and also this is my opinion, I think if we make it purely only a professional component, or if we only focus too much on the pathologist, him, herself, then we could still get some reimbursements, which is great for pathologists, but then we shoot ourselves probably in the foot, because the use case and the return on investment and the business case for a lab has still not been made. And who's purchasing and all these equipment, and who's investing in that? That's mostly the lab, right? So we have to have a good business case. So we have to take that into account and further start to evaluate that. So again, call to action, if you want to think about this with us, reach out in the chat, or sorry, Uda, I'm gonna tell them to reach out to you, and then you can link them to me. But that would be great. But what we're also doing with the DPA, for example, we are already, just like here with the ICC, we want to have that network that we will continue working with organizations like the AMA. We did that with the ICC, right? We had some calls with the AMA, and we were discussing like what is the best approach? How could we do this? Also with CAP, that is very important, because also there we have preliminary discussions, like how can we optimize working together. They have a reimbursement work group. DPA has a reimbursement work group. ICC has a reimbursement work group. So let's join forces. Let's set up a collaboration or something, so that we all can work on this to ensure that indeed we will not shoot ourselves in the foot. And the CAP realizes that very well as well. So we're just discussing like how could we optimize it, and how could we split efforts between maybe CAP and DPA to go with a great proposition to an AMA and CMS. And especially focusing then, of course, in the future with regards to algorithms, that we will have AI algorithms included. Then on top of that, the DPA has a foundation set up, and the DPA foundation is separate from the DPA itself. The DPAF indeed was seeking funding, because what we believe in is that it's also important, as was just highlighted, that patient advocacy groups, for example, will be involved. And therefore, outcome studies are very important, because if we know that this has effect and benefit on patients, they have a great voice, then using that outcome studies are usually patient outcome studies, what kind of effect does it have on patients, then use that also to show the value of digital pathology, and use that for reimbursements. But more so also to discuss with governments, discuss with FDA, so not only for reimbursement purposes, but actually in total, all regulations will then be affected, because we believe that if the patient is involved, there will be a voice that will be heard, and that voice in medical device industry is not well represented yet. And if that's getting better represented, and that's also what the FDA is fighting for, then we will get innovation to patients. That's the hypothesis. Then we will get innovation to patients faster. So that's what the DPA Foundation is seeking funding for. So also there, if you have like anyone in your network that could help this, please then feel free to reach out to us, and we can hopefully speed that up and strengthen the adoption of and driving the adoption with regulatory science. Any questions, or do we have to wait till the end, Joe?
No, all good. Questions are open, and I think Joe Stern-Trappen joined and raised his hand. Joe, great to see you.
Hey, it's great to see you too. Esther, thanks for that too. So I just wanted to give kudos to organizations that have been working on this, because I saw the announcement by CAP as well. I guess in terms of the details though, this is not ready in real time. Like, we're not putting codes, because I'd be excited to put a code on the stuff that I've been sending out now, but we're not at that point where you mentioned professional component, technical component. Those are not really established yet. You're working on it. Is that correct?
That's what we want to work on. So also the codes, that's not our efforts, by the way, from the DPA. So I don't know why they are there. And I don't mind. I don't need to know why they're there. I think it's great that they're there. But yes, you're correct. I don't know where that is right now with the components. But that's something that we definitely want to work on to get more clarity on it.
Yeah. I mean, speaking, you had mentioned also with more integration, cooperation with the CAP, and a lot of us cross-pollinate different organizations, and you're probably in a couple, and I'm on that digital pathology, computational pathology committee, and Marilyn is leading that. So I didn't know if I could certainly, you might have talked to her. Maybe this could be a point of discussion. I'm not even sure that's going to be in the agenda that's coming up, but this might be a good opportunity, since that meeting's coming up, to be kind of synergize, synchronize what people are thinking about how to move forward.
Yeah, very good idea. And yes, we have been discussing with Marilyn, And it would be good indeed if this could be brought up, and also more than happy if you have an opportunity that you think that DPA could present something there, then we're more than happy to do so, because I think that will speed up the MOU that we're developing together with CAP.
I'll reach out to Marilyn then, and then because I don't think the agenda has been formalized. Maybe we can put something together.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Bill.
Welcome.
No, this is great. I think, as Esther outlined, whether it's all technical, whether it's technical and professional, or whether it's dependent on the use case, is probably going to be the key question. So that should be well developed. Let's move on. We have a couple of more topics that I believe will be of interest. Here's a very strong acronym-heavy thing, so it must be from the government. There's a Cure ID initiative and platform that is a collaboration between the FDA and the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, which is a part of the NIH. So in other words, this is Cure ID from FDA and CATS and NIH. And this is very, you see, there's a lot of heavy hitters on this particular platform and app. And when looking in the fine print, we think that this may be related to our collaboration with the sepsis collaborative community. And it is clearly, emphasizing that, certain collaborations should be ready to go for outbreaks of emerging infectious threats. So this could be COVID, this could be monkeypox, but this could also be antibiotic resistance. So this is very likely sort of more in the infectious disease realm, but it shows that, several agencies, when coming together, collaborating with the WHO and several of the, good friends and in part participants here. So we just wanted to share this with this community in case someone is working in this field, to know that this platform exists and offers a lot of synergies. Let's move onward. So it's my absolute pleasure to feature a couple of books. I believe that this is probably some of the manifestation of the increased efficiencies in writing time during the pandemic. But there are three books that we want to outline. All of the authors have accomplished a public CC license, so you can download those. One is Uta Schmidt-Strasburger, Dr. Kröse and Ronald Christensen, two more statistics heavy books. And in Uta's book, some of the projects that you know from IC3R or the WHO, how to run an oncology cancer center, and from her Masters of Advanced Oncology project is heavily featured. Just to briefly outline that program, which some of the graduates have contributed in this book. This is a master online advanced oncology part-time course, and we're collaborating with Uta on several projects, but I just wanted to outline that this membership and people who have graduated from this course are now leaders in the cancer center field. So this is not so much featuring the course as that Uta is probably a great connection in case you want to expand your study into non-first world countries or cancer centers with appropriate knowledge of what biomarker studies and modern so-called advanced or precision oncology care looks like. So a quick plug for that program, and also to the other two, data science and machine learning, and also a great resource for statistical variance design and regression analysis. Very applied, so three great resources for everyone to enjoy. Couple of more interesting resources. One is from Brian J. Ford. If you ever watched BBC, you may know him. He's a very, very smart and very intellectual, but at the same time common explainer. He can break things down, and he has written this amazing paper, AI, Artificial Yes, Intelligent Not, and provides a complete historic background, including the first autonomous robot that gave a speech at 1928, and some aluminum man. And if you haven't seen this, it's a great read, and especially when you need some good slides for your introduction, just wanted to make a quick plug, and Brian has emailed several of his articles, so I believe that this is one of those that should definitely be featured. The next feature is a QuaRep-LIMI. This is Quality Assessment and Reproducibility for Instruments and Images in Light Microscopy, a multinational collaboration fully dedicated to reproducibility assessments of quality in images in light microscopy. By clicking through, I think, the two communities, PyCC, probably some others, CAP and DPA, etc., and all the others that I can't list right now, should probably consider joining this group as well, because I believe there are definite synergies. If you look at the QuaRep-LIMI working groups, you see many of the things that we thought about either within pre-analytics or within slide scanning become very interesting separate working groups even. So for example, just the stage and focus is its own working group, or lateral and axial resolution. So if you ever looked a little bit deeper into the DICOM standard or tried to align between different imaging formats, I think these topics apply, but it probably also applies just to traditional light microscopy. So Ulla, if you have the website, or then please, if you can put that in the chat, then folks can probably join and figure out what's there. Right, then we have an expert on the call, I believe, today, which is Margareta Colangelo. Margareta, are you there? I think I see your image there.
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining. So 2 quick plugs, and then maybe, Margareta, you can tell us also something about you briefly. Margareta has written hundreds, if not, I don't know what the total count is, but articles about AI, and it's quite fascinating from all angles, from all vantage points. I just took from your most recent blog one image that shows how AI can help address the global shortage of radiologists, but also of pathologists. Now, this is actually quite scary, but also raises some amazing points to see this in that clarity. So if you haven't seen her website and any of her articles, I'll be surprised. You're very active in LinkedIn. I've seen many of your excellent papers. So welcome. We're glad to have you here. And if you want to say a few words about your work and what you do, feel free to share.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. So basically, I've been following AI for 20 years, and I was originally in financial services, but then in 2014, I started following healthcare. So I publish every single day. I publish updates on progress in AI and healthcare across all diseases and across all areas of healthcare. And then every quarter, I publish a milestones report, like what you're saying. And then it just, like, for example, on the pathologist article, I also list FDA cleared pathology algorithms and things like that. So anyway, so it's just basically it's an overview of the entire worldwide landscape and the progress we're making. And
I can attest that this is not just a pitch. You really do this. I mean, if you...
Yeah, I do it 7 days a week, every day for 20 years. It's my passion. And in the radiologist one, so on the radiologist article, I've been tracking radiologists for 10 years. And so I constantly update. And when I talk to people in different countries, and I go to countries, I update that. But the pathologist one was done by a friend of mine who's a pathologist in Japan. And that one is very current. He just started doing that this year. So yeah, so it's my complete interest in life is using AI to improve healthcare.
It is absolutely amazing. Many of the people in PyCC probably share that interest, but I would say it's fair to say in our day jobs, we don't have time to keep up with this. And this field is burning, as you know. It's so rapidly evolving. And I mean, just the intricacy of how you keep track of this, I would say this is the best resource on AI from a comprehensiveness perspective that I've seen. So
thank you so much. And just so you all know, I only write about very prominent, respectable scientists at the best universities And all of the papers are peer reviewed. So I don't write about any hype or anything. I'm not interested in hype. It's all, and I've known most of these guys at, Stanford and these other places where they're making these huge breakthroughs. I've known them for a long time. So I don't write about anything. Everything is shocking. I mean, if you read about the gene sequencing at Stanford, it's shocking, but it's really happening. And I always meet them in person. So if you read any of these things and you click on it, there's peer-reviewed papers to back everything up.
It is exactly, what we're looking for. We try to make it as scientific as possible. You will see we feature a couple of articles later on in this session. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you join PyCC, and feel free to reach out to people. And also, this is an invite to everyone to check out Margareta's page. And it's more than a website. This is like a compendium. So extremely great to have you.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. All right. Couple of other updates. If you haven't had a chance, there was a presentation by two great colleagues. It's called Pathml. That's their platform. It's open source. It's a software toolkit for all kinds of computational path research. The recording is available on our website. The presentation was June 6th, and it's I think I forgot if it was 7 or 9 lines of code to execute or build your own AI algorithms. It's quite impressive what this team has built. If you have missed that, please take a look. You can click through the presentation relatively quickly, and it literally, I think this is the screenshot of the amount of code you need to deploy an AI algorithm, which I thought was phenomenal. So if you haven't seen that, please take a look. As part of our collaboration with other collaborative communities, one thing that's definitely an overlap, you see the representatives and the sponsors for that collaborative community called MedTech Color. I think MDIC is also involved and helped. They have shared with us their annual report, which I think we will share, of course, with our membership. And this is purely on color and color representation in medical technology. Super complicated, a whole list of meetings and resources in this annual report, and definitely also blueprint. So if you find a little more time, we probably consider also writing an annual report of what PyCC does, but I think the website serves a similar purpose. It's just so much and so much content. So just a quick plug, if you haven't seen this or if you're interested in MedTech Color, please take a look. Akin to what we just discussed with Margareta, it's there may be a shortage of pathologists, and I was very happy to see that the annual report of the American Board of Pathology lists the exact numbers, of course also the pass rates. So for those trainees on the call, this may be a good resource to have. But what this also implies is, of course, how many new pathologists come out every year. According to this resource, and we can share the PDF, this is supposed to be the new structure that will be released every year. They have also 5-year and 10-year summary numbers. So this will basically create the evidence, or the at least direct source framework, at least from the American Board of Pathology, of how many pathologists are there, what fields are growing. For example, there's molecular genetic pathology. You see how many there are. There's heme. As you can see, that's definitely double that. You can make probably some interesting predictions about what the trends are within the field. So I don't believe right now this is already there, but in 2-3 years you can probably see trends on fellowship preferences and what subspecialties are needed. I don't know if they're planning to do this by state. I think currently this is for the whole country. But again, a great resource, many more tables. This is just one tiny little screenshot of a multi-page document, of course. This is something coming out from the Commonwealth Fund. This is a relatively aggressive call to action where the so-called the Meeting America's Public Health Challenge document lays out very, very concretely what the administration should do to address some of the most challenging questions. This is from the executive summary, and this is taken literally straight up as it was. For example, Congress should establish this, provide that, and fund that. So it's then in the actual document, it specifies very distinctly what those projects are. I believe this is one of those documents that may ultimately result in RFAs in certain research projects and will be picked up by the different executive branches. But you can also see that the administration should, for example, embrace ethics, integrity, and transparency in decision-making in public health, or, of course, underrepresented minorities. Even state, local, and tribal territorial health departments should focus on certain capabilities. So this is a very good resource to have if you want to either back up your science or write your justification for grants or institutional pitches. So definitely wanted to provide this. It's a big document, and it just came out. So this is from June this year. If you haven't seen it, please take a look. And it's very directive. I think that was very surprising, because generally those documents are more sort of in a policy realm and not as prescriptive as this. But we thought of mentioning this definitely. There's a lot of activity with our projects. I think currently we have almost 20 different projects going on. And I wanted to say that we, with respect to all the papers we received, and we go through some of those really quick, but there's a challenge on ovarian cancer. Friends of Cancer Research will go through their framework of how they create collaborations and regulatory science projects. We have a preclinical toxicology team, CPIM, multi-stakeholder, non-clinical, but very likely very impactful for toxicology studies to use whole slide imaging initially, but then also AI. That will very likely form a blueprint for clinical. The SEER 2.0 database or database query is roaring. So if you haven't seen those videos, please check in. And there are various other studies, for example, a pre-analytics yin and yang study. So we will definitely provide an update here. And if you have other projects, please submit that. If you have any interest in those projects, just click through. Everything's online. All right. Super active month of amazing publications. And please forgive me if this is just a very, very quick and dirty overview of some work that probably took years to develop. But this is work from and around Dr. Diamantopoulou, ETH Zurich, published in Nature, illustrating that apparently the metastatic spread of breast cancer is accelerated during sleep phase. There's a beautiful News and Views article by Dr. Ball and Nagrath that outlines what they specifically have shown. Now, as you may know, I propagated for years to sleep less, so this may provide an additional incentive. Of course, I'm joking here, but no, the experiments and what they and how they studied this is absolutely astounding. And the direct relevance to this group is, as we have started here with the circulating tumor cells, if tumor DNA or circulating cells are really found at different time phases during day, it should this paper argues very strongly for very specific protocols, akin to, that when you get a normal complete blood count, you should be, sober and start in the morning and probably, not have eaten a lot of fat the day before, etc. So this argues for standardizing that for circulating tumor cells and or ctDNA. Another paper, also Nature. As you can see here, it was received in July 2020 and accepted in April 2022. That says something about the complexity. This is a multinational initiative that provides the first, at least to my knowledge, pan-cancer compendium of chromosomal instability, and they distinguish all kinds of different signatures of, small, short, intense in some cancers, but not in others, patterns of chromosomal instability. And it is far more complicated than previously assumed, but will definitely have some impact on some of the regulatory decisions that are pending regarding microsatellite instability, homologous recombination deficiency and an immune response. This paper here, I would definitely recommend everyone taking a note. This was published in JCO Oncology Practice, a single author paper by Dr. Jan Jorgensen from Denmark. And I point this out because it is very, very critical. As you know, one of our intentions here is to also push the regulators a bit, to challenge them and challenge their views. What this paper shows on this graph is that for at least in the last 3 years, some of the targeted drugs that are approved for a target, meaning for identification of a certain genetic abnormality, they had no accompanying companion diagnostic. And Jan Jorgensen reviews this and outlines the specific number that there is definitely a need for those settings where the drug is so effective, a companion diagnostic may not be initially available. And he, portrays here also that alternatives to FDA approved or FDA cleared companion diagnostics could be laboratory developed tests. And he goes and discusses that in very precise detail. And I think if you have any discussions about LDTs or you're advocating for or against certain legislative changes, this is a phenomenal resource to also show sometimes the drug approval is, of course, definitely meaningful, but companion diagnostic development lags behind. Again, direct ties to some of the initiatives that Friends of Cancer Research are portraying, and also that other endpoints, for example, circulating tumor DNA in expedited drug development, may be really meaningful. So again, Jan Jorgensen's paper, I think Ulla has already pasted it. Fantastic. This is a paper with an author list that's almost as long as the first page of the paper. Lipsadal from Amsterdam, UK, and many other laboratories. And this clarifies a long pending relationship between ductal carcinoma, sorry, there's a typo here, ductal carcinoma in situ and recurrent invasive breast cancer. So just briefly, the DCIS changes are shown in purple, and then the recurrent or subsequent invasive cancer is shown in orange. So this is just one of the many figures illustrating that those are truly clonally related. While that was always implied, this is at least one of the most recent papers that does this in succinct and sufficient detail to really enable sort of the molecular proof of the clonal relationship. Dr. Meyer Hein, in a German, Swiss, and Czechoslovakian collaboration, published this paper, and I know many of you are participating or are planning biomedical image analysis challenges. And in this paper, they solely dedicate an outline on how to make these reports most transparent. They don't go as far as saying that that's the standard, but effectively they're saying what should be done. And if you're planning and or conducting a biomedical image analysis challenge, this is a fantastic resource that I believe we can plug into some of the challenges that we co-organize with Roberto or with the group from Vancouver, etc. Few more papers. As you can see, field is very active. This is Andreas Mund published a review on unbiased spatial proteomics with single cell resolution. Just that goes into molecular cell. Says it all. Fantastic figures if you work in this field and you want to have some amazing explanatory diagrams what this technology can accomplish. Definitely important to know. The next one is a paper from MSK delineating some of the signatures for soft tissue and bone sarcomas with quite impressive findings. For example, that despite people sequencing sarcomas for a while, a substantial, for example, intimal sarcomas or dedifferentiated chondrosarcomas and a few others have a substantial fraction of TERT amplifications or alterations. So more or less a molecular paper, but definitely, I think it was a back-to-back publication with a separate one, definitely worth a plug. This paper here is featured for two reasons. First, it's in JCO, not a subjournal, but the actual main journal. I know many of you know about the TILS biomarker work group, so tumor infiltrating lymphocytes. I know we have our FDA liaison, Brandon Gallis, work on this topic. The fact that this group from Seoul, Korea has published this in JCO, and the extent of and the intensity of the analysis certainly justifies this. For example, I just took out one of the figures, the whole slide imaging level of 250 square millimeter. Each image was analyzed for about 50,000 tumor infiltrating lymphocyte spatially and local regionally within the tumor or the infiltration front, etc. And this is really a landmark paper illustrating that TILS should be, I know that has been published several times, but here in sort of a spatial context, should be one of the key biomarkers for immune checkpoint inhibitor therapy. The tools that were used here came from I think it's a company or a software solution. I don't know if this is the name of the company or the tool, but Lunit is part of the authorship, and that is definitely something to look out for. So if you haven't seen it, definitely worth a read, and it's of course, a JCO paper, so I'm sure it will be cited quite a bit and sets a certain standard when it comes to TILs.
Because it wouldn't be on a pack.
All right, two more papers. Annika Reinke from the German Cancer Research Institute in Heidelberg, along with an author list, I think over 90 authors, have outlined and classified common limitations of image processing metrics across different domains. It includes, of course, cancer, it includes imaging, radiology, endoscopy. And I think just the semantic and terminology that they use and categorize is at a very high level. To my knowledge, I think this is currently on bioRxiv. I don't know whether that has been accepted. We share the currently publicly available version. But if you're thinking about this, or if you're writing a limitations section on your image analysis paper, this is definitely providing an amazing framework. Last paper here from Sherman et al. In Nature Biotech. 37 cancer types have been examined, and they identified through deduction putative drivers with intronic cryptic splice site regions. So the formerly considered silent stuff now suddenly raises to the top, and fantastic paper. Please, if you haven't seen it, take a look. So we wanted to leave some time for discussion of new topics, of other comments. Here's the date of the next steering committee, which is in July. And then a couple of things that you can expect by then. First is very likely around this time, I think the actual final decision for MEDUFA is August 15th. So definitely an update from the Medical Device User Fee Agreement and the Valid Act. We will have a lot of updates from projects and work groups. And if you have links, papers, and other things, please send those along. And I hope we have some time for some questions or comments. But that would be sort of all the stuff that was submitted and collected from you, from the whole community.
Well, let's dig into that MEDUFA valid then, if you don't.
No, please.
Let's open Pandora's box in this one. I trust you in terms of reading. What's the current state? I mean, has it gotten a little better? I know it's been changing constantly, and I don't know if anybody on the pathology side actually is at the table providing that input. It seems to be driven by other stakeholders. And manufacturing and other things, and I'm not sure that's really ideal. But
so I know that ACLA, CAP, a lot of the professional societies have been very, very active, and the most recent rumors I've heard is that the various iterations between House and Senate have largely different scopes. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of the versions that are being discussed. And the last message I heard from the Hill is that the House and the Senate are sort of debating what version should go and what the different iterations have resulted in. And I would assume that the next public version will come out after July 4th during that time. But, you know, by mid-August, it has to be a decision. If I understand the legislative chaos right, if there wouldn't be a signature under MEDUFA, the funding for the FDA, at least for the MEDUFA subsidized section, would subside. And that would, of course, create then a strong incentive to get the funding that would otherwise come from MEDUFA, to get that through pre-market approval and other submission fees. So basically, I don't know, I'm largely oversimplifying. If valid go through, the valid framework, whatever it may be, is the one option. Let's say tech certification and, you know, review. In reverse, if not, the FDA will still have to step in for one or the other reason, either financial or for concerns, probably both. I don't know if Victor wants to comment on that. It's of course a very, very controversial topic, but I think currently, at least from what I've heard, everything stands as a true north for valid. The question is just which version. So before the House would vote, I think the Senate passed it, or at least said that that's acceptable. The House would probably tear it apart, but then the question is, well, who writes a new version, and what will that entail?
I don't know, Victor, if you wanted to say something, but I had a thought also. Is it fair, because you had mentioned the FDA doesn't have bandwidth, which we know, and I think you provided either a publication or website saying, you know, what would FDA do? Like the Sunshine Act, for instance. They, you know, maybe a big driver for that being not enabled is because they didn't have the bandwidth. So, you know, if funding doesn't go through, then there's really no teeth, in the sense that, you know, I think funding is very crucial for the FDA. If they don't have it, then they don't have bandwidth. And effectively, it's a moot point. You can create a law, but there's nobody to execute on it. I don't know if that's fair to say, but if the funding goes away, there's no way that they can actually investigate and do all the stuff that they've been tasked to do. Is that fair to say? Because I mean, that's a killer. If you don't get funding, it's done. You could put whatever regulations you want on there, and there's no way to get through it. It makes the queue too big.
So when valid would go live, let's say in September, there would be a grace period, of course, till I believe September 2024, to create appropriate regulation by the FDA. In one version, collaborative communities have been mentioned to provide input and help with creation of these guidance documents. In reverse, what happens, let's say, with a test that you would launch in July 2023 has so far not been defined. So it is assumed that you would just grandfather things until that one final deadline. It's similar to IVDR regulation right now. And then there's probably a phased rollout. Now, I think that seems very reasonable. I don't think we can completely just say, just get out, don't do anything. That argument has, I mean, that was the argument for the last 20 years. But I don't know what I mean, we have a lot of experts on the call. I don't know what others think about this.
I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. We need a transition plan. And I mean, from what I'm gauging in practical reality is that things are going to continue until that deadline, 2024, you mentioned. So LDTs are still going to be there, and whoever has been evaluating whichever deemed entities, it's going to continue until they find a transition plan. I know the way government and other thing works, sorry for the government, but that might get kicked the can down the road just because they haven't figured it out, because it's so complex, and as we all know. So it's possible 2024 becomes 2026 because we haven't figured it out. But I don't see it turning on and off. Like, okay, day one, this goes in and everything needs to go through the FDA. I think that's probably fair to say that the transition plan is going to be there at the very least.
I think the specific content will probably determine how much uproar will come from the field. And I also think it's fair to say that very few people have the time to even go through this. Each document is like close to 300 pages of intricate, law. And how that law is translated into practical reality is totally dependent on how the FDA would translate it into guidance. And personally, I think it should involve the field, and in one way or the other. And the FDA has demonstrated through numerous programs that they're willing to do this. This is one of them. But there's the network of experts, there's the digital health, center of excellence, and various other initiatives. So, I mean, I think the next month will probably delineate this. It sounds a little scary to say it like that, but it is definitely Pandora's box. I think you're right. All right. I have one final thing, and I know, I mean, I'm in Germany right now on vacation, so I can definitely do this. We have a 3-year anniversary, so I got my champagne here. I don't know, I wanted to thank you all and cheer at least virtually with you. It's been an amazing ride, and I very much appreciate every single email you guys sent, and so please join me. You can have a drink later or whenever you feel like it. But thanks a lot. So this was in July 19th, I think, of 2019. Esther, Brandon, and I started this, and then we had a quick meeting at Silver Springs. So definitely great work. Keep up the good work, and we look forward to seeing you again.